The California Angels. Yeah, I know. They're called the Anaheim Angels, or now called the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, or more appropriately, Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim of California of the United States of the Northern Hemisphere. Ha ha ha. But anyway, we're talking about the Angels What If, and that would be in California, the 1986 What If. Now, the California Angels were born as an expansion team in 1961, one of the first expansion teams in MLB history, alongside the Washington Senators, who got a new wind after the old Senators moved to Minnesota. So the Anaheim Angels started as the California Angels. Actually, they were the Los Angeles Angels for 3 years and played at what they call Wrigley Field. Not the Wrigley Field in Chicago, but Wrigley Field in LA, which was a tribute to Chicago because the Cubs had the California farm system for a long time. It was actually traded by Phil Wrigley for the rights to California. Something like that. I don't know the whole story. But the fact of the matter is that the Angels for years were pretty bad. But then in 1971, a new sensation happened. Nolan Ryan, even though he was wild and threw out wild pitches and walks, he was a strikeout artist. And the Mets needed a third baseman. For one of a third baseman, because the New York Mets for years always wanted a third baseman. The first great third baseman was Howard Johnson, if you will. But we're talking about the Anaheim Angels. And the Angels got rid of Jim Fregosi for Nolan Ryan, among others. Fregosi was a lackluster player for the Mets and was a better manager, if you will. So with Nolan Ryan and Frank Tanana being fireballers, the Angels looked good. Unfortunately, their offense didn't really do anything. So the Anaheim Angels, or California Angels, if you will, didn't get into the playoffs. Led by owner Gene Autry, the singing cowboy, if you will. Happy trails to you, anyone? Anyway, the 1979 California Angels finally got a playoff spot, and they went to the ALCS, take on the Baltimore Orioles. Unfortunately, despite a MVP like season from Don Baylor, the Angels went down to the Baltimore Orioles quite easily. Baltimore would then go on to choke a 3-1 series lead to the 1979 Pittsburgh Pirates in the World Series. So then, what you gonna do? So, what ends up happening is that the Angels languished for a few years, and then in 1982 they got Reggie Jackson, and they got a decent ball team, and the Angels were actually one win away from going to the 1982 World Series. They had Milwaukee dead to rights. But no, they choked. They gave up 3 straight wins. Well, in fairness, Milwaukee had the rest of the games on their turf, so home field advantage. So the Brewers used their home field advantage to beat the Angels and go to the 82 World Series called the Sud Series. They lose to the St. Louis Cardinals in 7 games. I thought it would take less, but Milwaukee proved them. And the Angels just had to sit back and groan. 1985, they actually went to the final week of the season with a chance to win the AL West, but the Kansas City Royals and George freaking Brett, of course, if you know what I mean, the 1985 Royals fucking over the Blue Jays. But anyway, I digress. You may be thinking, okay, the 1982 Angels should be the team I do for that, because they did blow 2-0 LCS lead, but it was best of 5, so yeah, and I think the Cardinals would have beat the tar out of the Angels. The Angels had a few non-scrub years. 1995 was the year that they should have went into the playoffs. They had a 10-game lead in the division. They were looking good, but Gary DiSarcina's major injury coincided with pitching woes, and the Angels did, in fact, nearly choke the 95 AL West. But Seattle choked back as Seattle lost a weekend set with Oakland, if memory serves me right, and the Angels beat Texas in 3 games. So the Angels actually ended up in a 1-game tiebreak with the Seattle Mariners, and we all know what happened. Randy freaking Johnson. Angels don't go on the playoffs. Of course, you know the Angels with the rally monkey and all that. I hate rally monkeys. Urgh. They won the 2002 World Series. But the Angels team I'm definitely doing for this what if is one of heartbreak. 1986. named one of the best postseasons in history, bar none. And I agree with him, despite only being 1 year old at the time. I would never have guessed what would freaking happen. But the Anaheim Angels looked good. So the Angels were going into the ALCS against the Boston Red Sox. And shockingly enough, they split at Fenway Park. Okay, good enough. Head home for 3 games at cavernous Anaheim Stadium. Now remember, Anaheim Stadium was a football stadium hosting the LA Rams at that time. So that's why there was like tons of seats and all that. Technically, the Angels play on the same site as Anaheim Stadium, but now it's more open air. It's got the rock pile. Well, that friendly towards baseball. Obviously, they needed to change it when the Rams moved to St. Louis in '95. But anyway, I digress. The Angels pull off a 10-inning masterclass in Game 4 to go up 3-1 in the series against the Boston Red Sox. The only problem is the Angels suffer a massive loss, and Wally Joyner went out with a staph infection. He couldn't play for the Angels for the rest of the ALCS. But it didn't matter. If the Angels could win Game 5, 6, or 7 for that matter, they could be going to the World Series, and Joyner probably will join them. And as we all know, Game 5, Mike Witt was pitching great, gave up a 2-run home run to, I don't know. I say Don Baylor, but I'm probably wrong. Or was it Rich Gedman? No, it was not Gedman, because Gary Lucas came in after Witt gave up that 2-run home run to make it 5-4 and plunked Rich Gedman in the ribs. It was not intentional, and Gary Lucas usually never plunked anybody. But Lucas was taken out, and DOnnie Moore, the closer, was ready to go. Dave Henderson had a 1-2 count, and the Angels were 1 strike away from the World Series. And then DOnnie Moore choked. Obviously, I'm not going to run the risk of being in trouble by using the footage of Dave Henderson's home run over the left field wall. Needless to say, it helped the Boston do well. Now, they say that was the catalyst. Now, people forget that the Angels actually ended up tying that game in the bottom of the ninth. And although Dave Henderson did, in fact, win the game for the Red Sox with a sac fly in the 11th inning. I remember reading that off a baseball card years ago. But anyway, all the Angels had to do was win Game 6 or 7 in Boston. They won 1 game in Boston. Unfortunately, they only put 4 runs on the board in the 2 games combined, and the Bo Sox usually won the right to the World Series and then got spanked by the Mets in 6 games. 7 games, excuse me. What am I thinking? Now, I'm not putting this Houston team in, but the 1986 ALCS was a classic between the Mets and the Astros. And, of course, the Mets winning that series. There's a reason. There's another Houston team that should have been in much better position than the 1986 NLCS winner. And that's saying something. So, for this experiment, it's time to predict that the Anaheim Angels would have came back from that Game 5 loss and won Game 6 in Boston, sending the Red Sox out of the park. So, it will be the Angels and the Mets. And no, there's no Fergozzi or Ryan. Although Ryan is still in the majors, Ryan's with Houston, not with the Mets. So we're going to assume that the New York Mets, well, of course, the New York Mets win the NLCS, like normal. And the New York Mets lineups will be what their World Series lineups are, from games 1 to at least 4. I'm still going to do games 5, 6, 7 lineups if they have to be, like the perfect lineups and all that. Meanwhile, the Angels will play with the right-hand guys, and then I'll just randomly see what the rotation would be like. Now, we'll assume that Mike Witt in Game 5, after Game 5, won't be around till Game number 3. They want him to pitch in front of the Anaheim Stadium crowd. And for this, we will assume that Wally Joyner has recovered from his injury and is allowed to be part of the Angels team. So let's just find out what happens. It's the California Angels and the New York Mets. The 86 Angels going to the World Series, hopefully trying to end their franchise's 25-year drought of being that way. Don Sutton gets to start in Game 1 against Ron Darling, who did pitch in Game 1 of the real World Series. Here we go. Well, the New York Mets prove no dummies. They were actually out hit 9-4, but they still win the game 2-1. Nothing much happens in this game. California's only run was by Bob Boone. Remember him? He hit his RBI single to score Doug DeCensus to make it 1-0. That's how it shaped up to the second inning when Ray Knight hit a home run off of Sudden. 1-1 tie. And then Gary Carter hits a double to right field in the fourth to score Keith Hernandez. 2-1 is your score. The Angels actually had runners on first and third in the seventh, but the census grounded out to end the inning. California didn't really do that well. It's weird how California sucked. They had 9 hits, and the Mets only had 4. Don Sutton pitched the whole game, because why not? He was at pitch count. Ron Darling went 8 innings, and then Roger McDowell decided to the fence. The Mets actually decided to put up a decent lineup. Now the Angels decide that they have to go with John Candelara. He was part of the 1979 Pirates that won the World Series, so you might as well use him in. We shall see what happens. All the changes in the world helped the Mets as they lost in the 11th inning, 4-3. Scored 0-0 until the top of the fourth when John Candelara hits an RBI single. Scored Bobby Grich. Pettis hits into a fielder's choice to score Boone. That's amazing. 2-0 your score until the bottom of the sixth when Howard Johnson ground ball. They got 1, but they couldn't get 2 for the double play to score Keith Hernandez. And then Rafael Santana hits an RBI double to score Carter and Hojo to make it 3-2. It stayed that way to the top of the 8th when Dick Schofield with an RBI single to score Bobby Grich 3-3. The Mets had the bases loaded, but Wally Backman grounded out. Nothing much happened in the 10th. In the 11th inning, Reggie Jackson hit a single to left, but Danny Heap had a chance to throw out Gary Pettis, but no, Pettis avoided the tag. The Mets went down easily in order in that game. So the California Angels see the lineup: Pettis, Jackson, Schofield, and Candelara with an RBI. Candelara went 6 innings, and Corbett, Forster, Finley, Chuck Finley was on that team. Lucas Ruel, Fern Ruel, remember him? And DOnnie Moore. I don't know about Fern Ruel. Did not know that. The Mets used a lot of players themselves. Dwight Gooden came in for 6. Orozco for an inning and a third. Roger McDowell. New York Mets now had to head to Anaheim Stadium for Game 3, the Cavernous Stadium. You got Bobby Ojeda against Mike Witt. Angels definitely have to use Mike Witt on home turf. And the plan failed as the Mets went into Anaheim Stadium and beat them in front of 60,000 plus people. No score till the third when Keith Hernandez hits a 2 RBI double to score Dykstra and Backman. Gary Carter hits a single to make it 3-0. And it was pathetic until the 8th when Mookie Wilson hits a fly ball to center for a double to score Hernandez and Danny Heap. Yeah, Danny Heap was the DH that day. Real life. Keith Hernandez made an RBI single to make it 6-0. So, great job by everyone. Hernandez 3 RBIs, Carter and Mookie Wilson. Bobby Ojeda, 99 pitches. 99 pitches, but it just ain't. Mike Witt went all the way except for T.R. Bryden. Who the heck is T.R. Bryden? Oh, you only played 1 year for the California Angels. Okay then. So now comes Game 4 of this series. Game 4 of the World Series now. Ron Darling comes back on the mound against Kirk McCaskill. So yeah, that's huge. And the Mets put up a 12-4 win. Looking good for the New York Mets. They put up 9 in the first inning. Yikes. Darryl Strawberry with a bases loaded walk. Danny Heap then hits a 2 RBI single. Rafael Santana with an RBI single to make it 2 runs. Make it 5-0. Lenny Dykstra gets an RBI single to make it 6-0. Wally Backman with an RBI double score of Santana and Dykstra. And Keith Hernandez with a ground ball single. So they actually had a stretch in which 6 of the 8 batters, there was a stretch of 6 of 8 batters scoring at least an RBI. Yikes. Nothing much happens, but Reggie Jackson hits a home run in the bottom of the third, and so does Dustin Census. Big play for him, 9-3. It stayed that way till the bottom 7. Gary Pettis hits a home run, 9-4. So the Mets might have tired themselves out. No, they didn't. Strawberry for an RBI single scored Keith Fernandez. Mookie Wilson with 2 RBI single, 12-4. And that was all the Mets needed. Dykstra with an RBI, Backman with 2, Hernandez with 1, Strawberry with 2, Danny Heber with 2, Mookie Wilson with 2, Rafael Santana with 2. Ron Darling went 7 innings, and then they decided to get rid of him, rest him. So Bruce Bereni and Rick Anderson came in. The 1986 Angels, Reggie. The Mets are up 3-1 on the California Angels. Don Sutton has to pitch Game 5. Mets go with Dwight Gooden. What can happen? Plenty, but not with the Mets, as the Angels shocked the Mets by winning 8-1 to go back home. 3 runs by the Angels in the second. Bob Boone with a 2 RBI single, and Dick Schofield with a big hit. Lenny Dexter does pick off Bob Boone at third base. The damage was only at 3. And then Wally Joyner came back from the staph infection, not really doing much in the World Series. Boom, 3-run shot, 7-0. Well, Bob Boone hit an RBI single to make it 7-0. Then Doug DeCensis, fielder's choice. The Mets just don't care anymore. 8-0. Looks like they're going home. Darryl Strawberry hits a home run, but looks like they'll be going home for Game 6 and 7. Nothing much happens. The Mets really fell flat. Dwight Gooden, 3 2/3 innings wasted. Anderson, Bereni, Neiman, and Jesse Orozco come in to pitch. And then the Angels, Joyner and Boone with 3 RBIs. DeCensis. So the California Angels definitely need a miracle. They go with the Candy Man, Candelaria, because he pitched in NL Parks. And besides, he had an RBI single last time. So they put him in for Game 6. Bobby Ojeda for the Mets. And lo and behold, the Angels pull off a rabbit tack, 10-4 over the Mets. Brian Downing hit a home run to make it 1-0. Darryl Strawberry had an RBI single, and Mookie Wilson hit an infield single to make it 2-1. We're thinking, oh, well, the Mets got this one. But then the second game, Wally Joyner does it again. Wally World, 2-2. Bob Boone hits a RBI double to score Gretsch. Dick Schofield hits a double to score Boone, and Pettis with a sac fly to score Schofield. So 5-2. Mets do nothing. Bottom of the 6th, they come back somehow. Said, oh, very nice. They could look at 5-3. Gary Carter hit a single to score Backman, 5-4. Oh boy. Unfortunately, Dick Schofield was just 6-4, thinking, okay, the Mets would be fine. Unfortunately, they had nothing. And they couldn't do it in the bottom of the 8th. And they paid for it. Reggie Jackson with an RBI single to score Gary Pettis. Bobby Gritch with an RBI single. Bob Boone with an RBI single. Dick Schofield with an RBI single. 10-4. Good buddy. That's your score. Pettis with an RBI. Reggie with 1. Downey with 1. Joyner with 1. Gritch with 1. Boone with 2. Schofield with 1, 2, 3. John Candelaria does go 5 innings. They let him only pitch 5 innings. Then they go with Corbett, Forster, Finley before Gary Lucas comes in and saves the game. The score was 5-4 when he came in, so technically Gary Lucas could pick up a save, and he did. The Mets are based by Carter, Strawberry. Well, it's down to Game 7. Ron Darling against Mike Witt. How will this go? We have a big Game 7. The Angels are trying to come back from a 3-1 deficit against the Mets. No score. Here we go. Gary Carter at the plate, a 2-2. Driven to left center. This could be back. Say goodbye to that one. Gary Carter. Boy, the Mets made a good move, picking up from Montreal. 3-0 Mets. And now, bottom of the 3rd. Here comes Hernandez, the 2-1. And Hernandez, base hit down the right field line. Here comes Dykstra. Here comes Backman. It's 5 for the Mets. Darryl Strawberry looking for a ball, 2-1, and a single. He drops it in. Here comes Hernandez, 6-0 Mets. Amazing. Mets look good here. Here comes Hernandez. The 1-1, bases loaded. And it's a base hit. Here comes Knight. Here comes Dykstra. He scores. It's 8 for the Mets. Nothing for the Angels. Wow. Angels are really running out of outs. Here comes the 2-2 to Pettis. Pettis loops one. Base hit. Here comes Joyner. Here comes Gretsch. It's 8-2. Bases loaded. Downing popped it up. And the Mets get out of it. Only give up 2 runs. And now a 1-1 to Pettis. Pettis. Fly ball. Wilson is going to take it. He's got it. And the New York Mets win the 1986 World Series. They nearly choked it, but they did it. The California Angels, they didn't let the Dave Henderson home run hurt them. They won Game 6 in Fenway Park. They thought they could do it and shock the world, but they shocked themselves. So yet again, another what if falls by the wayside. Great job by the Angels. Pettis with the 2 RBIs. Mike Witt went 5 2/3, could not do it. T.R. Bryden in his swan song does pretty well for himself. The New York Mets. Gary Carter. That home run just blew the tires off the Angels bus. Hernandez and Strawberry with RBIs. Ron Darling went 8 innings. Bert Berani comes in, saves the day, and the New York Mets win the title. A great day to be a New York Mets fan as they win the World Series, and the Angels do fall in Game 7. They kind of choked on their own vomit, if you will. Good night.